Alright, so let's give this dress a little bit of thickness and maybe cap some of these edges in here. So I'm going to go into solo mode here. And it looks like her arms are out here, but her holes for her arms are in here. So I'm going to actually turn off solo, go into transparent, and from the side just take my move brush and just kind of move the hole for the dress out a bit. Now if you're in transparency mode and you can't grab those points anymore, just go into ghost mode. That's a little bit more forgiving on being able to grab geometry underneath. And the reason I use ZModeler and get it as low as possible is because I'm basically pulling around a very lightweight envelope for the final product. So if I turn off transparency and hit D, that's going to do is underneath geometry, dynamic subdiv, that's going to toggle that on. So D and Shift D turns that on and off. And basically that's just giving me a smooth preview of what it's going to look like if I were to hit Control D and actually give it actual subdivisions. So, you know, the fewer points you have, the easier it is to kind of transition and average between these points, and it's just less things to move around, and the less things you have to move around, the smoother that average is going to be. So the fewer points, the smoother the curve, all that good stuff. So just an easy way to kind of get nice smooth shapes is just to start with primitives and then polish the heck out of it, or start with primitives, dynamesh things together, and then ZMesh it to get simpler geometry, and then you just get nice, simple, cartoony geo to kind of play with. So I'll go in here with my standard brush here, kind of brush these out, and then maybe hold down Alt and brush those in. You can use your move brush, and of course you can always use the deformations and polish and stuff like that. Now I got a couple decisions to make here. Do I want to give this thing, do I want to just cap this in here and close holes, or do I want to give it actual thickness, or do I want to do both? And it looks like I'm going to have to do both, which is good. More things to talk about. So what I'm going to do is manually, you know what, instead of pulling that out, I'm going to go to the deformation menu, and under inflate, while it's just a single sheet, if I go into solo mode, you're going to see it's just one thin sheet of geometry, which we're going to change in just a second. But I'm going to go down here, deformation, inflate. I'm going to type in like 2 and hit enter. Let's go out of solo mode so you can see what I'm doing. You know what, let's inflate like 5. So really 2 plus 5, I just did about 7, just to kind of bring it out a little bit. And then I'll go in here manually and kind of pull up just a tad. So now to give this dress some thickness, there's a couple different ways to do that. Like I said, I could close holes, or if I go into solo mode here and I go into my ZModeler brush, so BZM is ZModeler, hover over an edge and do close. You can do close a convex hole, and then you can just close these holes here. And you can actually, if you pull, it'll close. And if we turn on polyframe here, you can see it'll actually cap it as well as do a rounded cap for you, depending on the settings that you have when you're doing this. But in this case, what I'm going to do is give it a little bit of thickness, and you're going to see it's already kind of standing out from this dress a bit. So what I'm going to do is ensure that it's all in polygroup, which it is. So that means if I go in here and do QMesh polygroup all, and I just click and push, that'll actually give me shirt thickness. Now if I go into solo mode here, you're going to see what it's doing is it looks kind of weird, like it's in a bubble or something, or it's inverted. It is actually inverted. If you go down here to the very bottom to display properties, you're going to see we have double and flip. If we turn on double, it'll look fine. It'll be like, oh, it looks great. But the problem is, since those normals are actually inverted, it's showing us both sides, but it's being inaccurate as far as if I were to go and inflate this, let's say, and I crank it up to the right, it's actually deflating. Not what I wanted, right? Because it's looking at the surface normals, which look fine to me, but to the computer, it looks like this. They're inverted. So to do it right, I'm going to turn double off and then hit flip. And now those normals are flipped and inverted, and everything's nice. I go out of solo mode, and I've got a little thickness in between the bottom middle part and this part here. And if I alt tap this dress part here, you're going to see this is still Dynamesh, but it is nicely polished Dynamesh. So what I can do if I want to kind of give it the same treatment, I mean, it is totally smooth, and for 3D printing, this is fine. But just to kind of demonstrate it, I'm going to go into solo mode here with polyframe on. We got a polygroup at the top, polygroup at the bottom. So I have X turned on. So I'm going to go to my geometry, ZRemesher. Let's do a target polygon count of like 2, change adaptive size to 0. Turn on keep groups, and that'll just keep this polygroup border as a feature so that it'll actually give me a ring of polygons around there, and then we'll just hit ZRemesh. And if that's too many, you can just do half, hit ZRemesh again, get you even less. You can keep hitting that. Now these polygroups up here, you can keep them as they are. They're not that bad, but if you want to, you can hold down Control Shift, isolate this one, Control Shift drag to invert, Control Shift tap this one to add to that. So now I've basically just gotten rid of both of those. And now I can do a delete hidden. And that's for you geometry modify topology delete hidden. I'm going to use my ZModeler brush, hover over an edge, do close convex hole, and just click. And if you click and it gives you rings, just click and drag and then drag back, and then I'll get rid of the rings. Click, hold down Control Shift, isolate both of these since they're both considered the same polygroup. And for me, I'm just going to go to polygroups, auto groups, and now I have a different polygroup for each one because they're non-vert welded. And it looks like this one, this edge ring here, is kind of bowing in a little bit. I can just delete that by hovering over an edge to insert, single edge loop, hold down Alt, and just get rid of that to kind of fix that. You can also, let's go ahead and get rid of that, and then we'll do another insert single edge loop. And now we can insert one. If we wanted to bow out slightly, you can just turn up the Z intensity and kind of push that in and just kind of figure out, looks like a Z intensity of like, geez, really low, like 4 will kind of continue that shape. So it's up to you. But now what we can do is if we hit D, that'll give us again that dynamic preview up here. So we'll go to, we got dynamic turned on. If I hit Shift D, that'll turn it off. And one problem is it's averaging these vertices. So if I want to keep a nice crisp line around these polygroups, go to crease and then hit this crease PG, and that'll actually crease the polygroup line. Of course, if you didn't have a polygroup there, all you need to do is go in your ZModeler brush, hover over an edge, and then just do like crease edge loop complete, and then just tap that edge. If I tap these edges, it's just going to crease those edge loops. Up to you. But now if I hit D, it'll crease those polygroups there, nice and crispy. And then we hit D here, it'll go ahead and give us a dynamic preview. Now, if I go into solo mode and turn this on, you're going to see it's kind of averaging between these polygroups here. So if I want to, I can hit crease PG here, and that'll go ahead and crease the lines between the polygroups and keep those nice and sharp. And it's kind of giving, instead of a nice V shape, like in our reference here, where it just goes up into a notch, it's kind of averaging those vertices here. So I'm going to hit Shift D. I'm going to hover over this edge right here, and then I'm just going to go into crease by holding down spacebar, crease edge. I'm going to crease this edge, and then go to the back here, and I'm going to crease this edge. That'll keep them nice and sharp. And there we go. I can hit D, go out of solo mode, go out of polyframe mode, and then it's nice and sharp. Now, if I want there to be a thicker transition, I can go in here manually and just use my move brush, or what I can do is hit Shift D, hover over this QMesh polygroup ball. If I go into solo mode, you're going to see I have a polygroup on the inside, a polygroup down the middle, and then a polygroup on the outside. Now with QMesh, one of the features, if I QMesh polygroup all, it's going to take these outer polygroup polys, and it's going to QMesh them, and by default it's going to add geometry. However, if I start pulling and hold down Shift, it's just going to pull those polygroups along the surface normal. So if I go out of solo mode, and then just grab this and hold down Shift, it'll just make that a thicker transition. So you can kind of feel out how thick you want that transition to be and just keep pulling, and it'll just move those out for you. And of course, if you want to clean up this a little bit, you can go through here and just with your move brush and kind of move this stuff around. And if you want to make the inside transition a little bit thicker, go into the inside here, go into QMesh, start QMeshing, and then hold down Shift and just pull these in like so. And that'll just give you a nice wide distance cover. Hit D to go back into dynamic preview, and now you can kind of move her arm straps up a little bit, move her arms in a little bit, and so forth.